Hello guys and welcome back to another episode of SuperCoach mates. Well, round one is finished. Very mixed round for a lot of sides out here. So I've got both Thomas and Jonas tonight. And we're just gonna do a quick recap of round one. So I'll introduce them. So I'll start off with you, Thomas. So how you going, buddy?
Yeah, it could be better. Obviously my own side didn't do too well, both SuperCoach wise and AFL wise, but I guess we move on to round two and hopefully things a bit brighter then.
And I'm also joined by Jonas, and our magpies got up Jonas, so hopefully that was a bit of a bright weekend for you.
Yeah, it was certainly a positive out of a week in which I missed a lot of high scores, having Rochelle, Hayes and Martin on the bench, for example, but glad to have them at least, so can't complain too much.
No, I can't. All right, well, we're going to get straight into it. So you probably won't see a lot of my face again if you're watching this as a video, but we're going to go through each of our slides. We're going to pick out a hero or a player who did very well, and then a dud or someone who didn't do well. And we're just going to talk about each other's side. So who wants to go first? I'm going to pull up Thomas's side first. Hang on.
Yeah, righto.
I'm going to get your side up, Thomas.
Perfect.
In the meantime, just give us a rough guide while I get these up. How did we go? How do you think we went in round one? Hang on. Never mind, I've got your side up.
Whilst Nathan pops my side up. I think one of those where a lot of people that had cookie cutter setups, which I guess was, very much the norm because of the lack of rookies and lack of lack of opportunities we had seen these players play. It seems like he suffered a little bit. If you went at ballsy and picked a couple mid-prices which popped off, you couldn't really complain and you scored pretty well. But yeah, just because Nathan's got my side up on the screen now, I scored 2,214, which I thought was not too bad considering at one point I didn't think I would get to even 2,000, but even then, I think 2,200 was just below par. I think the average was maybe high 2,200s to 2,300. Yeah, it was one of those rounds where, we'll speak to Justin McInerney in a minute, but overall, I didn't really miss out on much in regards to players that I must have had. Obviously, like so Cripps, Heaney were pretty frustrating because I had those players in my teams at certain points throughout the preseason, in particular Heaney. George Hewitt, I mean, myself and Jonas were at that game and really impressive. Hewitt was pretty much in every midfield chain. It was pretty much one of the most consistent midfielders in that group. In 131, you cannot complain from a 399k mid-price with DPP. Jaden Short was, you probably pump out a 109 and think, it's not the best. But if you look at the defender scores from the rest of the round, he was actually quite impressive. Took every kick out, didn't put really a foot wrong. But Crisp and Whitfield. Crisp was, I guess, Nathan and Jonas can speak more about him, considering he's really disappointing in his role, which is very problematic in the future. Whitfield was one that I was skeptical about in the season and kind of just picked in because of price point, but he was a little bit concerning, similar to McInerney. I'll explain why in a minute. But the standouts, consistent as ever, the midfield still is a little bit underwhelming. I know a lot of people are starting to trade him immediately. I wouldn't budge until I see maybe a 3-round sample size of shit scoring, but I have full confidence that he'll bounce back along with the rest of St Kilda side if we've got any chance in 2022. But Took Miller, Matt Rowell pretty much saved my ass. I didn't expect him to go both that massive. I expected Miller to do what he did there, 137, can't complain. But Rowell, 157, contested animal, an absolutely tall West Coast and new one, which is really nice. And I mean, I can't complain. I've got all the rookies that score well. So Rochelle, Martin, Hayes. Obviously didn't have Hayes and Martin on field. I know a few people that went. Darcy was able to get Hayes on field and etc. So it's just I'm grateful that I have them on the field. Don't have to worry about correctional trades to bring them in. But I'll speak quickly about Whitfield and McInerney in particular.
Please, McInerney.
So this was an interesting one because I had Tim English at times and Heaney at times with, I think, Hinge and McCartan as kind of your D5-6, which the main thing I was worried about, and I still stick by it, but the main thing was added defensive security because DeConning went down, as we all know, with a head clash. So he's a good chance of missing this week. And all of a sudden, if Hinge was on my field, I'd be lacking another defensive rookie. Obviously, with news coming out that O'Leary is out for about 2 months, opens up a spot for Skinner and the like. So there's probably more defensive rookies to come by. But I decided to go one more extra in defence, and because of the expensive rookies around, obviously, hindsight's a great thing, and you downgrade Ward and all of a sudden got money to go to a primo. But Ridley was my other primo, and I don't think he did too well either. So I wouldn't have lost out on much there. But McInerney was an interesting one because he's obviously a supremely talented player, and the Swans love the ball in his hands. He's elite kick. So I watched that game with quite an intent because obviously Whitfield and McInerney as a POD. The main issue is, and this strings to Whitfield as well, was it was just such a heavily contested game. And I did actually do some research afterwards, and McInerney scored a 40 in elimination final. So, and it was the exact same way that game was played, hotly contested, not much in it, and the ball not actually getting out to the wing. So Whitfield suffered as well, like 73. I think it was on like 64 at halftime and barely touched it afterwards when that game got close. McInerney, similar thing. Every time he got the ball, McInerney, I think he butched it like 3 times. But other than that, he was slick as anything and pinged it to his teammates with ease. And he's a really good player to actually watch because he's so clean on both foots. And when he gets the ball, he's off, and there's a very few opponents can catch him. So he's one that I want to trade out because I know that his ceiling, if he can produce that in a contested game, he's in trouble because the ball just doesn't get into him. The Swans like to hack it forward, and they've got the timber down forward to really assist that kind of game style. And they played Geelong, I think, on Friday night, so it could be another contested game down there. So I'm not really sure what I'll do with McInerney. I kind of want to give him one more chance because I know what he's capable of. Obviously did in the JLT where he scored like 130. When he gets the ball in his positions, he's damaging. So is Lockie Whitfield. But
just to add on with those two, I believe the ground's quite narrow.
Yeah.
So that may lend to more contested style of play. And so maybe come another venue and another round, you might see Whitfield and McInerney find a bit more space and get a bit more uncontested possession.
Yeah, 100%. It was heavily contested, as I said, and it didn't really make a good day for McInerney in particular. But obviously, him being owned by less than 8% of teams just really compounded the fact that my score suffered a little bit. I got a little bit lucky because obviously Ridley, who was another primo, was on my mind, and he didn't score much better as well. So it's one of those things where it's obviously a very small sample size and a score that historically didn't do well against last year. So I'm not overly fussed, but it is a bit of concern because I have if I decide to pull the trigger in trades, then I might do that. I'm kind of hoping that Berry is injured because it gives me an excuse to trade who I want to do without losing McInerney as well. But I'll open up to you guys before we start moving on to Nathan and Jonas's team. I know, Nathan, you got a few questions about St Kilda, which inevitably I've got to answer.
I do. So first of all, obviously, I can see that not that this is relevant. What the heck is this Owens with 2? Can you explain your reasoning behind this pick?
Yeah, I didn't have many options, unfortunately. It was kind of, I think it was Machida Owens, Bradley Hoff, and Jackson Mead. I wasn't a fan of Jackson Mead. Ironically, he was on that scored the most. Even Cooper Stevens as a sub managed to score more. But yeah, it was one pick that I thought he's got potential to score well because he had ability to score well in a short amount of game time in the Amy series against not a shit opponent in Essendon. However, obviously, I wouldn't say it was obviously it's not the most ideal debut, but the issue was the kamikaze kind of style that Collingwood did with the midfield. We just got smashed. Like every clearance, no chance that Machida Owens was going to get anything, considering that Crouch and Steele suffered as well. Maybe if Steele scored 150 and Crouch 120 and then half our midfield went nuts and Owens got 2 as well, I'd be definitely concerned. He's obviously one that now I'm worried that, obviously job concern's a bit of an issue considering we've got players coming back at some point. So he's one that I'll probably offset before the price rises at round 3. To maybe like a Durden or something, but I'm not too fussed now because he's obviously one that I can get rid of with, I think I've got about 100k in the bank, so it's very easy to move up and down, especially if Berry decides to, not play with his shoulder concern. But if if Barry and I decide not to trade McInerney, then Owens is probably not a bad loophole whilst rookie prices are stabilising. But yeah, he's one that suffered a hell of a lot on Friday, and I kind of feel sorry for the kid a little bit, considering that St Kilda's midfield were dreadful. And you can't expect him to score much when Steele is not even scoring 100 as well.
Yeah.
Yep.
I'm going to move off SuperCoach here. I'm going to pick apart this St Kilda side. So are you concerned with, first of all, are you concerned with the fact that it took a first game for you guys to get back into that game? And second of all, do you think that this three tall structure with Hayes and Marshall and King is going to be something that's sustainable, given the fact that I think I read somewhere that I think Max King was roving off Tim Membry's drop marks, and I think Tim Membry roved a goal off Max King's drop marks, and they're in your side as key forwards.
Yeah.
So do you think that this is a sustainable model for a top 8 tilt, or do you think that perhaps they need to look at dropping one of these guys and perhaps go a bit smaller, like a Melbourne or like a Collingwood or someone like that, Richmond, someone like that? Well, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, first of all, Supercoach wise, I hope Hayes doesn't get dropped for Ryder, for example. Hayes single-handedly won us that third quarter. His work ethic and mobility in that forward half was ridiculous, and I reckon he's a pretty talented player. To score 3 goals, 10 marks, whatever he did and his 127 Supercoach points is very impressive. I don't think he'll do it every week, obviously.
No,
because I think,
he's not going
for example, he was at 120, I think, at three-quarter time and quietened out significantly once Collingwood got back on top. But to answer your question, 3 talls was one thing that worked really well in 2020 because we suddenly, St Kilda's kind of game plan has always been bomb it forward aimlessly and let the tall forwards do the rest of the work. It just almost feels like that the small forwards are becoming a bit lackadaisical and expecting the ball to come to their feet. So I was sitting behind the goals on the second level, so I had a pretty good view of the game when St Kilda was in their forward 50. Every time the ball spilled, there was not one small forward crumbing. So you had the likes of Quain or Howe more rebounding, and then that's why it ended up being Membry and King having to read the drop ball themselves because the small forwards weren't doing anything. The issue is that I think the small forwards are getting a little bit ahead of themselves. So you got Higgins, Butler. They're obviously very talented players, and when they're on, they're on. But when they're off, they're horribly off, and they play a little bit selfish footy where they don't really read the drop zones too well, and they just expect the ball to come out the back for them. So I think they just have to sit down and do a bit of grunt work themselves. I do think the 3 structure forward isn't too concerning because of the mobility of that forward line. So King's obviously, how mobile he is. It doesn't help he gets double teamed every week, not just by Collingwood, who did a very good job, but by basically every team in the AFL. Membry's got a ridiculous vertical leap. And you got Jack Hayes, who's actually not pretty mobile himself. I think the main issue is just that small forward brigade is next to useless at the moment, that it doesn't help. The other issue is just Jack Steele is the best 2A runner almost in the competition. However, he's just not getting the support he deserves. So Crouch is becoming a bit selfish, and you got Gresham and Sinclair came in. So Gresham is one that is attacking, but sometimes can be too attacking. He runs forward of the ball. Same with Crouch. And their disposal was quite average. Crouch had a terrible game. Even though I think he scored like 112 in Supercoach, and Gresham actually did okay. Gresham was quite dangerous going forward. The interesting thing is, and I think this you can link this into Supercoach relevancy, was when Sinclair came into the midfield rotation, we looked a lot stronger. So when that whole third quarter came into play, Sinclair came into that rotational, and he actually saved our asses a little bit, was a bit more defensive, provided a bit more defensive structure into that midfield with the likes of, Zach Jones and Hunter Clark out. So I think hopefully for St Kilda's sake, and even Supercoach's sake, if you want to go completely a potential point of difference, if Sinclair stays in that midfield rotation, and someone like a Crouch or something ends up on a wing or something, it's probably not the end of the world. And I think we looked a lot stronger when our starting midfield was any of Crouch, Gresham, Sinclair, and Steele. So I'm hopefully, fingers crossed, against a pretty damaging, midfield in Freo, that's the case. But Yeah, that's how the cookie crumbles with St Kilda. But hopefully we bounce back and against Freo, and hopefully for SuperCoach wise, because I think me and Jonas both have still no Mcrae. We're fingers crossed that he can bounce back and really dominate against Freo.
Yeah. I did read an article too saying that a lot of St Kilda's midfielders did get perhaps a bit arrogant. They got forward of the contest a lot. So I think that's something that Brett Radden will really try and spark a training this week, is to stop them from getting forward of the contest, because too many times they had no one at the back and Collingwood were just able to waltz the ball out through the contest from the front, and then they were basically gone. So yeah, let's hope. Have you got any questions for Thomas, Jonas, before we move on to your side?
Not St Kilda third, please.
Not really. Would you say some of those underperforming premiums, are they any cause for concern?
Yeah, I mean the only one, McInerney, obviously it's more the case that I brought him in as a pod and he went shit, is why I'm pissed off with him. But Crisp is the only one, and I guess we'll speak more about him when we you guys reveal your round one scores. He's a role concern. I think the other ones, you got to remember that you're looking at a 1 game sample size. You're not looking at a 5 game sample size. McInerney was averaging 54 after 5 games. You'd be like, shit, we got to get rid of him now. You're in trouble. But you're looking at 1 game sample sizes. You got players who are coming back from pretty interrupted COVID off seasons as well. Coaches are still tinkering with their side, so I wouldn't break the glass quite yet. There obviously is a few positions where there's huge amounts of concerns related to some players, but I guess we'll speak about that. And obviously some players we've missed out on that are going nuts for round 1. But then again, you've got to look at who they played and things like that. So it's a bit of a careful line ball when you do want to do your trades round 1, because unless you're going for overall and have got a good argument to come into the top 1,000, top 100 round 1, where you set yourself up for making a tilt at number 1, then you want to be making those aggressive moves. But you got to look at the likes of other people. I think I read a stat somewhere, this was AFL fantasy related, but the guy that won 2019 was down at the 20,000 mark and won it from there. So as we say, it's a marathon, not a sprint, because it's very easy to get a good round 1 score based on luck, essentially, and picking some players like Cripps and those mid prices who save you money and score a primo score. But whether it's sustainable enough is another question for sure.
Definitely.
Yeah. All right. Well, we've reviewed Thomas's side, so now I'm going to pull up Jonas's side, and we're going to do your side, Jonas.
Sounds good.
There we go. All right. Let's have a look at Sir De Gucci.
Thank you. Yeah, it's a very interesting name. Anyway,
There you go.
Scored the 2260 this week, which put me around 30,000. So neither here nor there. It was a bit in between. But some of the picks I'll touch on that Tom didn't speak about as much. Firstly, with Crisp, obviously that score isn't ideal for the price you pay. But in saying that, he did have, I believe it was 2 frees against and I think 5 clangers. So if he gets rid of some of those and cleans up his possession, that's probably an 80, and then you don't absolutely scold his score. But in saying that, yeah, it's a bit of a concern. Hopefully he can bounce back next week, because St Kilda were pretty depleted as a midfield group. So you'd be expecting at least a 90 to 100 score. But hopefully against Adelaide this week, he can turn it up a bit. And then this next pick, it was a roller coaster ride with old mate Dawson.
Yes.
The first half. Yeah, oh God. I think he initially
went missing.
Sorry?
Went missing.
Yeah. Tell me about it. The first few minutes I didn't see him. He came onto the ground, did a few nice things, which elevated his score, because I think he had like 6 possessions and 30 points to halftime, but was playing a bit half forward and then also in the middle, and he looked completely out of place. And he was about then scaled down to 25 at halftime, and I was thinking, oh God, here we go. And then the third quarter rolls around, and I see him with a defensive group walking down into the backline, and I'm thinking, thank God. He then fires up completely, kicks a nice goal, takes even a few kickouts, and takes some nice intercept marks, and that's sort of carried his score to a 98. So I think he's one that will definitely push the top 3 defenders if he keeps that role. I can't see why he can't average 105 plus. And as long as that calf holds up, which I think it should, he'll be a good option. Hopefully, when McPherson comes back, he doesn't take any kickouts away from Dawson, but one where, given a few of the other defender premiums, such as Rich, Ryan, Ridley, and Crisp, and Whitfield actually, one that I can't complain with. And Short, yeah, I think he had more kick-ins than he did possessions around the ground, so that was a bit concerning, but he'd take a 110. Hewitt, I think, is close to a must-have with that score as well and price. I think, obviously, he was playing against quite a leaky Richmond midfield, but he just does everything well defensively and offensively, and he's one that I'm not afraid will lose mid-minutes when Walsh comes back, because I think he's their best defensive mid. And I didn't have De Koning on field. I think I've just done those trades, but I had a Hinge over De Koning. Missed McCartan's score, which is a bit frustrating, but happens. Into the midfield, Miller is just a jet. I think a lot of people have him now. Obviously, he played against an Eagles outfit who I noticed Nathan's shaking his head, but you've got Cripps at least, so he sort of made off for that. Yeah, he's very consistent, best work rate in the game. I can't see why he won't average 125 plus. Parrish I was going to pick Steele, but I was about 6k short, so I had to go Parrish over him, which at the moment looks okay given Steele's poor round 1 game, but Parrish as well. Essendon's midfield got completely demolished.
Man.
So, yeah, he didn't get his usual CBA disposals from centre clearances and stuff like that, but I believe he had 30-something touches, so he's still able to reach about 100, which is okay given everything else that's happened. Neil, Rowell, solid. Berry, I think Berry will be all right for next week, so one where I'll just wait and see on how he is able to play with this shoulder knock. I think Fagan said himself that he'll be right to go, so given how well he performed in the first half, I'd like to just give him one last chance and see if he can string together a full 4-quarter performance, because he had 67 or 68 by halftime and then went down a bit. Then we have Brody there. I've made some tinkering. I actually have Ward on the field and Rochelle was in place of Brody on the bench. But Brody looked good and then didn't play any of the last quarter, which was a bit concerning. However, I think his role in the team for now is pretty solid and one who gets a lot of mid-minutes. So he's not a must-have by any means, but one who should be able to reach 350,000. And then the rookies, Horn, Francis and Dacos, not much to say. Solid. Ward was a bit of a concern. I think he had a bit of a cramp, and so hopefully he can bounce back, but one that I wouldn't be fielding anytime soon unless he starts showing some better scoring potential and output. And then into the rocks, I had Darcy, and then with that laid out, sort of threw some spanners in the works, so I had to go down to Marshall with a 124. You can't scoff at that. And then into the forward line, Zeri and McGovern scored in the 70s. I like McGovern's role. He could have scored a bit more, but he was taking a few kick-ins and he looked good. And with Zeri, I think he's definitely shown to be a good and capable scorer. He's definitely ahead of CCJ in terms of job security, and Goldstein's looked to be able to play as a pretty good forward. So Zeri should be able to keep that R1 sort of role at North Melbourne. But what really hurt me was having Hayes, Martin and Rochelle, as I said previously, on the bench, and then also stuff like Hinge over McCartan. So I think I lost in total around 200 points just based off picking the wrong rookies, but you can't really predict that. You tend to field those who are more expensive and experienced. However, hopefully this week some of these people that I field at D8 and F8 can outscore the ones on my bench. But all in all, not a bad round. I don't think I'm missing, apart from maybe Durden, no really must-have rookies. And then there are a few value options that scored quite well. And then you got your Halls and Stewarts. But I'd like to see, I wouldn't trade yet. I'd like to see how some of these underperforming players go first before I make any rash decisions. But I'll throw it over to you guys. Any questions?
Yeah, that's fair enough. I will ask you about that. So obviously, I'll put this open to both of you. So just how important is it to try and conserve trades? Because obviously we've only played one game here, and I went through my side and like obviously if you've got SuperCoach Plus, if you scroll down the bottom a bit, you can see the most traded players who've been traded out that are in your side. And the top player I noticed was Josh Ward, which I think is insane. And Jack Crisp, who just, as we said, had 2 free kicks against and 5 clangers. If he doesn't have them, that probably becomes a 90 given the state of the game. So just how important is it to not make these rash trades after 1 week and just to hold fire and just get a second go before you pull that trigger? I'll throw to you first, Jonas, since we're talking about your side. Just how important is it to hold?
It's not of utmost importance if you have the sheer belief that the player that you're trading in is going to average, say, 5 to 10 points more than the player you trade out. For example, if you're trading out Whitfield, Ridley, or Crisp to a Hall or a Short, you need to be, or Short or a Stewart, you need to be almost 100% certain that the player you've now selected to trade in is going to outperform the player that you're trading out by a significant amount. And based off one sample, I'm not in any position to be able to give that sort of confidence. And so I think I'd rather hold trades, particularly given COVID. Say Crisp gets COVID next week, then I'll trade him because he's given me a reason to. I don't want to field Hinge and McCartan, for example. So I think I'd rather hold the trades, at least for this week, wait for next week, see if an injury arises or another underperforming premium does poorly again before making any decisions, because price changes only happen after 3 games have been played. So I don't think there's much need to trade now. Just wait and see. And also the player you're trading in, if it's a rookie, for instance, Nick Martin or Hayes, you can afford to wait a week, given you should have someone good at F6. See how Hayes and Martin go this week. Make sure they get through unscathed before then bringing them in. Because the worst thing would be to trade in, say, Nick Martin, and then next week he pulls a hamstring, for example, and then like Kyle Langford literally did, and then you're stuck with a dead rookie and also down a trade.
Yeah. So I'll talk about my position. Are you the same, Thomas? Just try and conserve as much as possible?
Yeah, 100%. As we alluded to last week, when Lloyd and Darcy were both out with COVID. Oh no, Darcy wasn't related with COVID stuff, but Lloyd was. But it could well have been that this would have been round 2, and then Lloyd was out with COVID, Darcy was out injured, and then you're like, shit, I don't have the luxury of round 1 trades where it's unlimited. A lot of people, I think, forget that round 1 gives you unlimited trades, so it was mitigated, and I think a lot of people just forgot about it because they got, oh, sweet, I can trade Lloyd to Crisp or whatever. But if this was round 2 or 3, all of a sudden that's burning 2 trades straight away without making any advances in your team. So you got to be really careful about what you're doing with your trades. Obviously, you can be quite aggressive and get rid of a rookie, and maybe if you've got cash in the bank, you can bring in someone like a Lipinski or someone that scored incredibly well round 1 at a lot cheaper price, hoping they'll be a keeper. But even then, I'd be a little bit wary about what you're doing and perhaps just be a bit safe. Like, as we said, it's only a 1-game sample size. You don't want to rush into any decisions head on. Obviously, if you've got good enough reason to, then go ahead. And if you want immediate points on field, could be another reason why. yeah, it's one of those things where, as Jonas said, probably wouldn't be the worst idea. Obviously, Berry's injury concern will go into a bit later. Could be a forced trade. You obviously don't want to keep players that you think will be hindered by that injury, and Berry's shoulder's one of them. I think he had a Rico as well last year. So it's one of those things where there's a fine line between trading because it's a more of a rage trade, or there is genuine merit to trade due to injury or whatever. But you've got to realise that 35 trades, only 5 extra than what you normally get. So, and then you're taking out the fact of COVID-related stuff, that players dropping like flies every day. You just don't know how that's going to go, especially going into the winter season. So it's one of those things you just be really careful. But before we move into Nathan's team, Jonas, I got a couple questions specific to your team, and I guess it's relevant to Nathan's as well because he's got both these players. But we'll talk briefly about Josh Ward and Will Brody. Brody was very impressive from what I saw. He was in the midfield rotation quite heavily. Not as many kicks as I'd like if I was an owner myself. He had a lot of handball change, used the ball pretty well, was on about 70 something at 3/4 time and barely was on the pine. Barely was on field, sorry, during the 4th quarter when, points were up for grabs. Like Heath Chapman took about 30 of them with his match-saving spoil. But Brody was on the bench for about 70% of that quarter. Are you concerned in any way that if that's the case now without a Fife, if Fife manages to line up round 2 or 3, I think he's touch and go for round 2, but could well be round 3 with Darcy. Are you concerned that, granted maybe you get another 70, 80 score based off, St Kilda's a pretty depleted midfield, could score pretty well there, but after that, if Fife comes back in, all of a sudden there's one less rotation to go around for him. Are you concerned about what the future holds for Brody, or do you think you're pretty confident purely based on price point that he's someone that you'd want in your side for a bit of a longer term run?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think he's one that I'm certainly going to persevere with just purely because of his role and scoring ability. However, yes, there's concerns about the fact he sat almost 20 minutes on the pine in that last quarter when the game was on the line. So that compounded with the fact he got 0 marks. So that sort of says to me either he's not spreading hard enough or players are trying to just ignore kicking to him. Suggest he might be down the pecking order, but from what I saw, he seemed pretty clean and played his role to almost perfection. And I have question marks on Fife. Yes, sure, he's a star and everything, but he's going to come back into this side underdone. And with him and Mundy aging now, I think there's certainly enough opportunity for Brody to cement his claim as a midfielder. On top of that, I've got a quote from the Fremantle coach, Longmuir, who said that Will does a lot of his work that goes unnoticed because he's so in and under and tough. He then also complimented Jordan Clark and said that both him and Clark should be around for a while. And so that fills me with enough confidence to suggest that Brody should make it to at least round 6, which is when I'll be intending on going quite aggressive with my trades. And by that stage, if he stays fit and playing, he should be around 350,000 by that stage, which will mean I've done all right with the pick, and then I can trade. And then was your other question regarding Ward, right?
Yeah, so Ward, before you answered, obviously we all have him. He was one of the highly earned ones. He was probably one that I personally had doubts on just because, with the full complement of Hawthorne mids, how much rotation he gets in. From what I heard, I didn't watch the game too heavily. Apparently, he had a decent game, but just wasn't really SuperCoach relevant for his scoring. Obviously, pumped out at 36, struggled with an ankle injury towards the end. I don't think the ankle injury was too bad at all. But what are your thoughts on Ward? And he's obviously someone that people have gotten rid of straight away because of the high price tag, shit score. Is he one that you're just going to, with his potential of scoring 100 plus when he's given the opportunity to flourish in a midfield role? What are your thoughts on Ward? Obviously, you've got him on your bench now, I see, just with how you've set up your team for this week. What are your thoughts on him? Is he worth trading out or is he worth keeping for an extra week before his initial price rise?
I think he's definitely worth holding for another week, but he's certainly on the chopping block. If he puts out another 36 or he misses this week, I could definitely see myself moving him to either a Durden, and the other one that impressed me was Alex Davies, who scored 90 and seems to have now a role at Gold Coast. So if he looks to not really be able to show that scoring that he did in the Amy game against Richmond Ward, he'll be out of my side. But as Nathan was saying, it's pretty ludicrous to trade out a rookie based on one poor performance, given his high draft pick nature and also the fact that he's shown the ability to be able to find the ball at will. So there's one where I'm going to give another chance to, but I certainly have my questions on. But just on the topic of trades also, I think the only real appropriate time to trade right now would be, barring injury to Berry, would be if you don't have all three of Hayes, Nick Martin and Rochelle, and you want to make sure that you can serve a trade boost next week.
Yeah.
I'd then be maybe making a correctional if you have Owens, for example, down to one of Martin or Hayes this week, just so that next week you can use 2 trades instead of 3 to bring in the other 2 players.
Yeah, that's fair enough. All right, so I'm gonna put
last to Nathan.
I'm gonna put myself back on the screen now. And I'm gonna get out of Jonas's side. And I'm gonna pull up my own side. There you go. Right, so I got 2,215 this week, which I thought was quite high. But I've ended up being beaten, I think, by Jonas. So I came on nice and short. So stud ball, I was going to go Matt Rowell, but then I saw that both of you guys had him. So that kind of defeats that. So I'll go Patrick Cripps. I know you two have your question marks about him, but he really looked back to his best. I've been saying that all preseason. And his 132 definitely says to me that I can see Jonas shaking his head there down the bottom. That he definitely looks like he's back to the player that he was a few seasons ago in that Carlton midfield. I'll also give a shout out to Matt Rowell. Getting 157 from a $342,000 midfielder is just amazing. I definitely think that he has the potential to be one of these top midfielders at the end of the year. Just always in and under, and obviously a great decoy for Touk Miller, who I don't have. My dud for the week. So I know you guys have picked on Jack Christ, which is fair enough because he's only got 69. But as we said, he did have 2. I think Jonas said he had 2 free kicks against and 5 clangers. But I'm gonna pick on Security again. My dud for the week, Jack Steele. Obviously, as you guys can see on the screen, I had Mcrae as my vice captain, and I could have taken his 133. I probably should have taken his 133 in hindsight. But I chose to roll the dice with Steele, just because I couldn't figure out who to bring in. I wasn't confident on bringing in any sort of non-playing rookie. And he, along with Secure, let me down. Only the 87, and it's probably ended up costing me, I don't know, it's ended up costing me an extra 50 odd points. That I could have probably used to try and get on top of Jonas. But otherwise, thought I was pretty happy. I'm glad I've got Rochelle, Martin, and Hayes already, so I don't have to worry about getting them in. I'll try and get Josh Ward off the field this week, but I am going to go on record as now. Because I know you guys might ask me this question. I will not be trading this week. The only way I'm going to be trading this week is if someone from my side has like a 6-week injury, and obviously then they become a forced trade, but I will not be trading at all this week. In fact, I probably won't even look at my side until Thursday night when I pick my vice captain, who will probably be Jack Mcrae again. So yeah, I will not be trading this week. But that's pretty much my wrap up, because I think everyone else has pretty much sort of stolen all my limelight. The other one I'll give a shout out to as well, Jack Mcrae. I know I've had him as my vice captain, but he's sort of a bit of a point of difference for me because the other two don't have him. And I definitely think he's probably going to be the top midfielder again this year alongside probably Touk Miller. So, I was overall pretty happy with my weekend. I'll throw to the floor for questions.
Just off the bat, I don't think there's nothing really you should be concerned about. It's a pretty solid side. Sicily worked out well for you, which is frustrating for me because I could well have had him ahead of McInerney. But I do have one question on Sicily. Are you seeing him as obviously at 448k? I'm assuming you're seeing him as more of a keeper than a stepping stone because he's almost at that 500k mark. Are you worried a little bit that he didn't have much to do against North Melbourne? He was able to do a lot of it by himself, a lot of uncontested pill, read the drop zone, rebound real quick, that sort of stuff. Are you worried a little bit when he plays a forward line better than North Melbourne that he has to be a bit more accountable, a bit more of a leader down there now with a pretty young Hawthorne backline with a lot of rebounders? Are you worried that he has to be more, I wouldn't say a lockdown defender, but someone that has to go more one-on-one because the guys like Giath, when Impey comes back or whatever time, when Will Day comes back at some time, then you're worried about his scoring output?
Look, he had 27 disposals. So I think he's still going to find the ball. And I think that if they're going to try and keep anyone free in that back line, I think the last thing they want to do is lock Sicily down. Just because I think he's a really good intercept mark. And he's obviously got that booming kick on him. So I think his role looks pretty safe. I guess for me, the only thing I am worried about with Sicily, I did flag this in our preseason podcast, is he doesn't mind getting into Michael Christian's books every now and then. So if he can keep his cool, I'm happy to have him as my fourth premium. Obviously I'm looking at him as being more of a keeper. I don't think he's going to be someone who I get rid of unless he falls foul of Michael Christian for a long period of time. I guess the one I'm probably missing down there is George Hewitt, sorry. Who, if Jack Chris puts out another 60 odd, that could be a move that I make. But yeah, obviously I think for the minute the sides, I think it's relatively okay, and I think probably most of the players I've got, if not all of them, will probably play in round 2. So I don't think it's just a matter of trying to figure out which rookies to put on the field, and whatnot. So yeah, I think overall I'm pretty happy with where I'm positioned. But yeah, I think Sicily, his role is probably one that they would want to keep as close to what it is as current, because I think if they start locking him down, I think that's when he'll lose his cool. And I think it sort of negates what he does best.
All right. My question is, with Max Gawn, he obviously eats up a lot of available money. Would it be too extreme a theory to run, say, a Grundy Hayes and then Dixon at R3, and then use the Gawn money to upgrade some of your McDonald's or O'Driscolls to, say, a Lipinski, and then another player up to a premium on another line?
It's not the craziest move in the world, but my only worry with that is Hayes going to be able to score 127 every week to justify doing that? Because I think Max Gawn, we were all at that game on Wednesday night. Jonas wasn't, but he had one of those games where it was an almost game for Max Gawn. He was quite fumbly. He dropped a lot of marks that he would normally take, and he still got 92. So, I guess the question is Jack Hayes, first of all, is Jack Hayes going to actually stay in that St Kilda side? You would say based on his Friday night performance that he has to, but at the same time, if they're going to bring back in Ryder, which I think there's a strong suspicion they will, well, I think unfortunately for Jack, he's probably going to be the first one that they drop. So I think that's a very risky strategy. But if Hayes can keep his spot in that side, and he can keep doing that, then I don't think it's the craziest move in the world. But I wouldn't be confident doing that after 1 week.
What do you think about Lipinski as a mid-price option in the midfield?
Well, I know for a fact that the Western Bulldogs supporters were not happy to see him leave. I think they really liked him. I think they really valued him. And I think there is a role there in that Collingwood midfield for him. And I guess he showed on Friday night that, when he's given a chance, which unfortunately wasn't at the Bulldogs, I think he played 11 games last year. And I think basically one of those was after round 11. And he was this unused sub in another game in round 22. So he just was starved of opportunities. We do see players come out in their first games for their new clubs, and they do dominate, like what Lipinski did. I guess he does have that experience at AFL level, but I would like to see a second go before I'm fully committed. But I think if the cards play the right way, I would definitely look at getting him this or next week. It's just a question of what I can do to get him. But yeah, I think there is a role there in that Collingwood midfield for him. But I will hold fire and say that a lot of players do well in their first games for their new clubs. Obviously, they've got all that built up energy. They're excited. And then their second games, they can be a little bit harder for these players. So I think, he looked really good. And I think he will be probably a good pick, but I would like to just see a second game before I'm fully committed to him. I will just touch on that as well before we wrap up. So if you haven't got, say, Rochelle or Martin or Hayes, I think the craziest thing you could do is jump off someone who didn't play well and get these guys in and hope that they're going to score 114, 118, and 127 every week. I wouldn't be trading out, say, Robbie Gray. I haven't got Robbie Gray, as you guys can see. I think I'm already happy to concede that bet I have with you, Jonas, on that Heaney and Robbie Gray thing. But obviously, Robbie Gray only got 33.
He's already beating him by 100 points.
It's pretty much game over. I wouldn't be trading out, say, Robbie Gray for Josh Rochelle and hoping that Josh Rochelle gets 118 every week. I just don't think that that's a good strategy. I think you're just burning a trade because you're only probably going to trade Rochelle again anyway for another premium. So you're essentially using 2 trades to get rid of Robbie Gray, and then you're pretty much back to where you were anyway with Gray. So I think if you can get rid of someone a little bit cheaper who's perhaps underperforming, such as Thomas McInerney, ideally you want to go up. But I think if you took a mid-price punt and it backfired, I think that's the way to getting these Rochelle and Hayes and stuff. But I definitely wouldn't be getting rid of a Robbie Gray for Nick Martin and expecting Martin to score 115 every week, because I just don't think that's going to happen. I'm done.
Yeah, that's fair enough. Before we wrap it up, well, obviously, Nathan, you said you weren't going to pull any trades. Jonas, are you going to tinker with any trades at all? Or are you going to hold pretty steadfast into round 2?
I thought about going, I think it was Ward and Berry to Lipinski and Durden, but I was 3,000 off, and with Berry basically guaranteed to play this week, I want to wait on that trade and see how Berry can perform, and then also how Durden will go as well. I think he's got a pretty good role, but I want to see one more game and make sure he gets through unscathed before I pull any triggers.
Yeah, that's fair enough. I mean, the only ones I'm considering is if I decide to go off the McInerney bandwagon, then I'll pop off. But other than that, I think if Berry has any doubts of playing, I can go up straight to Lipinski. So he's one that even
nice.
Luke McDonald as well, which is I don't mind as a bit of a POD going early on him. So he's one that I'm just trying to obviously maximize points on field without going too crazy with 3 trades and all that. Before we wrap it up, we'll quickly look ahead to the round 2 games and we'll look at VC and C options and wrap it up for today. Or tonight, sorry. So quickly, just one word answers pretty much. We'll go through the list. Dogs, Carlton, obviously Marvel, both teams. One team off an impressive win, one team wants to rebound. Who are your thoughts on who's going to win that one? We'll start off with you, Nathan, quickly.
I think the Bulldogs will win this game. I think Carlton are getting ahead of themselves. I've already seen a lot of Carlton supporters think that they're already assuring for the premiership and that they're already locked for September. They beat a Richmond side who, admittedly, whilst they've won 3 premierships in the last 6 or 7 years, they sort of are on the decline and they lost prestige. So I think the Bulldogs might bring them back down to reality a bit this week.
Yeah, and Jonas, I'm assuming you're the same boat there.
If Bontempelli doesn't play, I see a world where Carlton can win, but in saying that, I think it's going to be hard to beat that Dogs outfit.
Yeah, 100%. I think they're getting pretty pissed off about last week and rebound. And I'm hoping, for my sake and Jonas's sake, that Chera or Hewitt do a stopper on Mcrae. That'd be. But we'll move on.
I will be putting the vice captaincy on Mcrae. I'm just putting that out there. Yeah. Vice captain Mcrae, just every week they play on the Thursday or Friday night. It's just the easiest thing to do.
100%. If you have him, it would be crazy not to. But Friday night could be the game of the round, actually. Sydney and Geelong down at the SCG. Sydney off a really impressive win against GWS, and then obviously Geelong dominated, pulled the pants out of Essendon. What are your thoughts, Jonas, quickly on Sydney Geelong?
I think Geelong will bring home the W, especially if Jeremy Cameron plays. If he doesn't play, it's probably line ball, but I think having watched that Geelong game, they looked uber impressive over Essendon, so it's going to be hard to see how they can lose if they maintain that sort of form.
And Nathan, how about yourself?
Yeah, I think that Geelong will win this game too. They actually have a really good record at the SCG, I think, as well, Geelong. It's funny, this rivalry is sort of a little bit of an odd one in that Sydney actually have a great record down at GMHBA Stadium, and Geelong have a good record at the SCG. So, bit of a quirky one there, but yeah, I think Geelong will win this game.
Yeah, I think Geelong might take home the dub. They look really, really impressive against Essendon. I was thinking maybe a quick team like Essendon or a team with a lot of energy would try and mitigate Geelong, but Geelong seem to get it done every year, week in, week out. But Collingwood Adelaide MCG, I'm assuming you guys might pop down to that one. What are your thoughts? Obviously, Collingwood would be with big favourites going into it. Adelaide did, almost upset Freo, which would have been quite impressive. But what are your thoughts on those ones? And do you think they can continue their kind of, real quick game style going into this game?
If Dawson plays behind the ball, we're in all sorts. But in all honesty, I think Adelaide are probably a bottom 4 team, although they looked pretty good against Fremantle. But I think our midfield will overrun theirs with Dawson down back and Laird on the sidelines.
Yeah. And Nathan, what are your thoughts, Ben? Yeah, yourself?
I'm the same this week. I tipped against Collingwood last week, and I backfired, so I'm not going to do it again this week. I think this game could be a comfortable win. I might be getting ahead of myself there, but I don't think Adelaide are the same side off Adelaide Oval. A lot of young sides do this, especially interstate.
No, that's fair enough. And you guys obviously did quite impressive round 1. But moving into Marvel Stadium, 4:35, the Lions and Essendon at a horror show would be desperate to try and get back on the winners list. Unfortunately, it could be a tough against Brisbane with their compounding injury list with Carl Langford also going down. What are your thoughts on that, Nathan? Pretty confident Brisbane?
Well, we do see sides who get smashed often bounce back the following week, but gee, it's hard to tip Essendon at the minute. They just got smashed around the ball. I don't think Jake Stringer's back. I think he's their best player, their most important player. So, I mean, if he doesn't play, then I think this game is going to be one-way traffic again. So I think I'll comfortably tip Brisbane. I think if they're going to be a top four side, I know Damien Barrett's tipped them for the premiership, but if they're going to be that, then they have to be winning these games against these sort of so-called sides who should be making the top 8. So yeah, I think Brisbane.
And your thoughts? I'm assuming similar sentiment, Jonas.
Yeah.
Yeah. Adelaide Oval. I'm assuming both of you on the Port Adelaide bandwagon want to bounce back against the home crowd. Could be pretty big for the supporters trying to get a win against Hawthorne.
Yeah, I think Hawthorne were lucky to win that game, and although Port will lose Leo and Mackenzie, I believe, their defence will be a bit shallow, but I still think given their depth in the midfield and also some of their forward line prowess, I know there's no Dixon, I still think they'll run over the top. They look pretty good against Brisbane and just sort of ran out of gas towards the end.
Yeah, fair enough. I mean, yeah, as you said, Port deep, back pretty deep. You've got likes of Sin and Skinner hopefully coming in replace, which would be quite handy for Supercoach wise. But moving on to the other 8 p.m. game.
I'll just say Port Adelaide too. Keep it nice and quick. Just Port Adelaide. Bobby Gray might kick 5 goals on that Hawthorne defence if he plays.
Yeah, no, that's a fair point. Anyway, Gold Coast, Melbourne. Is there any world which Gold Coast win this game? Obviously, I'm looking at the odds here. 95% tipped Melbourne. Gold Coast obviously looked a bit shaky, but then steered the ship home by 27 against West Coast. But with a full complement of Gold Coast midfielders plus a fit Wits, do you reckon Gold Coast have a chance against the reigning premiers? Either of you can answer this one.
No. I'll just put it bluntly. No, I think Melbourne might. This game could be a bit of a massacre up on the Gold Coast. I'm just checking the odds now. So I'm just here on Sportsbet. I think Melbourne are probably close to $1.20 favourites. So, I think they're going to be hard to beat this year, Melbourne. Although I definitely think that one thing Gold Coast can do to help beat Melbourne is to send someone to Christian Petrarca. They can't let him just run around like the Bulldogs did. They basically showed him no respect. So, yeah, I think Melbourne win this game by probably 40 plus points.
Yeah, and Jonas, what are your thoughts on that one?
I think Gold Coast have literally only 3 to 4 good players, and they're all in their midfield, and that midfield's still going to lose. So that sort of says a fair bit about where Gold Coast is at. They were literally behind against a depleted West Coast team who were fielding debutants until that last quarter, thanks to Rowell, Anderson, and Miller, and also Witts was pretty good. But even if they break even somehow in that midfield battle, they've got Casbolt and Scholl up forward who are just completely unreliable. And then down back, I'm not sure how they're going to contain Brown and McDonald and then Pickett and Fritsch. So I can see this being, as Nathan said, a pretty comfortable win. But I do expect Gold Coast to be probably competitive for 2.5 quarters, and then I think Melbourne are going to kick like 5 goals in the fourth to 0 and then win by like 50 points.
Yeah, all the premiership sides have that killer instinct. They just sort of toy with you for the first 2.5 quarters. They sort of get to about a 10, 15 point lead 3/4 time, and then they just kick away in the last quarter and make a comfortable margin. So I can't see this being any different.
Yeah, 100%. We'll move on to the Sunday games. We've got 3 more left. So Marvel 110. I'm assuming not many people will tune in to watch this unless you're a North supporter. But North West Coast could be a lot closer than what people predict. West Coast did show up a fair fight against Gold Coast. I think they're expecting Jack Darwin to come back from a foot injury. What are your thoughts on this one, Nathan?
I actually think North Melbourne might win this game. I think they're going to have to win these games that are sort of around these bottom sides around them. So I think this is definitely a winnable game for North Melbourne. And I think they were quite impressive last week. I think they probably outplayed Hawthorne, especially that first half. And if it wasn't for Jack Gunston, you could argue that they probably would have won that game. So, yeah, I think North Melbourne they can win this game, and I'll probably back them in at this stage. But if Darling comes back in, I think that's a massive in for West Coast. But at this stage, I'll take a punt on the Kangaroos.
What's your thoughts on that one, Jonas? Do you agree or disagree?
I'm a bit on the fence because I think Mcrae injured something.
Yeah, he was out. Yeah.
And so if he's not back, and then they've got to contend with Kennedy, Dixon, Bailey Williams, and Darling returning, I think there could be a few headaches, particularly because West Coast sort of put up a decent fight. But in saying that, I think they're still too depleted to be able to run out this game as victors. So I'd put North Melbourne, but not with a heap of confidence.
Yeah, I think the deciding factor, Marvel Stadium, West Coast don't really play too well there as well. Don't really like playing, I think, those smaller grounds. If it was MCG, maybe a bit different. But yeah, I think this could be the chance where Horn Francis really shows why he was the number one draft pick, I think.
Might be 100 plus this week for Horn Francis, I think.
Yeah, it'd be nice. But Richmond and GWS, a repeat of a prelim final, might have been from a couple of years back.
2019 grand final.
Yeah. Just looking at the odds here now, I think Richmond are still favourites, which is quite surprising, to be fair, because they look very disappointing against the Blues. And GWS put up a hell of a fight to just lose out against Sydney. What are your thoughts on that one, Jonas? Is the Tigers to win, or do you think GWS have a sniff here?
GWS will win. No Rowell or Prestia. Their midfield's just completely depleted. They're going to have to force Martin or Bolton to play regular minutes in there, and I think both of them are more effective as forwards. So I can't see a world in which Richmond will win, just based on their injuries and their lack of midfield depth.
Yep. And Nathan, sorry, what are your thoughts on Richmond GWS?
Yeah, so this is one that I'm on the fence about. This is actually my on the fence game. I seem to have this thing for Richmond. Don't know why. I was there on that game, and they did get off to a good start against Carlton, but they just got overrun. So I'm tempted to give them one more chance. But I think this game will be one that goes right down to the wire. I did have a look at the line, and the line's only 2.5 points in betting. So I think all the punters are expecting this one to be a very close game. So I'm leaning towards Richmond only because it's at the MCG. But I could go the Giants quite easily. That might be one that I'll wait till Sunday and tip that.
Yeah, that's fair. And the final one of the round is my boys against St Kilda versus Freo, down at Optus Stadium at 6:20. Potentially with no Fife and Darcy, thank God. But if Fife and Darcy come back in, could be a bit more of an issue. What are your thoughts? I'll let you guys say this before I say my 2 cents on that one. But what are your thoughts on those ones? Jonas, you can kick it off.
I expect St Kilda to bounce back at least a bit because they were pretty poor. So I expect a pretty big response. But in saying that, Fremantle looked pretty impressive against Adelaide. They just couldn't capitalise on their dominance. So I think at home as well, if they get some of those big inclusions back, they should be able to eventually find a way to win. But in saying that, if St Kilda come out of the blocks hard and Fremantle continue scoring more points than goals, St Kilda, there's no reason why they can't win.
Nathan, your final thoughts on that round to finish off with?
I'm just going to pull it bluntly. I think even if Fife and Darcy don't play, I still think Fremantle will win this game. I think that Heath Chapman spoil on the goal line. I'm still amazed that didn't go over the line. But those types of moments are moments that seasons to build off. And if Fremantle are going to make the top 8, I know it's only round 1, but I think that will be a defining moment in their season. And I think that they're going to have that purple army behind them in West Coast, although I still think they're capped at 50% capacity over there, which probably will help St Kilda. But I just think that Fremantle are a much better side at Optus Stadium, and I've still got my question marks on the Saints. I'm sorry, Thomas, but I've still got my question marks about St Kilda's game plan and sort of what they're trying to achieve. So yeah, I'll back in Freo at home.
Yeah, it's fair enough. I guess my 2 cents worth. I think if this is 1 week to galvanise a group, away from home, away from St Kilda supporters, is at Optus Stadium against a raucous Freo crowd. And I think if we want to show that we're any threat at all to the top 8, even though we look like we're more a bottom 4 side at this rate than a top 8 side, but if we have any hope of winning that one, it'll be against Freo away. I think a big miss for Freo is Matt Taberner. We also have a tendency of stuffing it when there's always a second key forward, a la Myercheck of Collingwood when there was Mason Cox to deal with as well. We have a tendency to screw things up when that happens. So I think having Lobb there, Dougal Howard takes Lobb, and then we suddenly have a nice rebound going for it. I do hope that our midfield consists of Sinclair, Steele and Crouch, that combination of Gresham. I think that worked really, really well, and that was the combination that we went into when we bounced back in that third quarter against the Pies. But I guess time will tell. Kind of glad it's a 6:20 game, so I don't have to worry about a Friday night or Saturday night to ruin my weekend. But just to finish off with VCs and Cs, obviously Nathan, you're pretty keen on Jack Mcrae, as would any owner would be. Who would be your captain if Mcrae doesn't quite get to the heights of what you're expecting?
I mean, I'd be tempted to take a punt on Brody Grundy against Adelaide.
Yeah, that's fair.
Other than that, I probably don't really have anyone. Like, I don't think Max Gawn is captain this week. I think Wicks is a very good tap ruckman, and I think he might negate some of Gawn's work out there. The other one, the problem is if Josh Dunkley wasn't at the Bulldogs, I'd probably almost consider putting a captaincy on him, but they're obviously in the same side, so I guess it makes it a bit more tricky, but I wouldn't mind. Yeah, I think Grundy. I wouldn't mind maybe going for Rowell either. I know that's a bit of an out there one, but I think he just looks like he's going to be a 120-point player every week, and I think that's what you want. So I think Grundy is probably going to be the one I end up going with, but
yeah,
I wouldn't mind going Rowell as a bit of an outsider.
And what are your thoughts, Jonas, quickly before we wrap it up?
With De Koning out, I think I'm going to have to loophole Dunkley because I've only got Dunkley and Hewitt playing that round or that game. And then I think for captaincy, I initially put it on Touk Miller, but I think I'm going to keep it on Lachie Neale against Essendon. I can't see why he can't score.
Yeah, that's him as well.
Well enough, because a lot of Geelong players such as Dangerfield went huge. So I think Neale could be a cheeky little, I don't know if he'll be a point of difference captaincy option, but one that I'll probably put it on if I don't go Miller.
Yeah, that's fair enough. I think Miller's a pretty safe pick. I don't think anyone's going to run with him. If anything, they might put a bit more attention head on head, maybe Viney on Rowell, trying to get his contested ball work. Miller's just an endurance machine. For myself, I think VC will be pretty safe. I think on Lachie Neale, I'm hoping he beats up on Essendon. He has a pretty good 5-game history against him or something like that. I'm pretty sure he dominates him most times. I was surprised in it on 140, which is a very impressive score. I think a lot of people neglected Neale a little bit ahead of likes Mcrae and co. And the other one I'm thinking of, if I feel a little bit brave, is Zack Butters against Hawthorne. I think he could towel up against them. Butters is
that's a good one.
Nuts against shit teams, and Hawthorne's one that struggled to beat North Melbourne. And I think Butters just could dominate against them and easily score a 140-50. So we'll see how that goes.
But definitely would be a point of difference captaincy.
Yeah,
I think Zack Butters. I don't think many people would put it on him. That could Be a game changer, though.
I was sceptical about his scoring against Brisbane, but he still managed to score almost a 120. So I think Power will be point to prove Adelaide Oval with the massive contingency of Adelaide supporters coming down there. And I think be quite an intimidating factor for Hawthorne to really choke him out. But that's all we got time for today. We'll probably try and maintain either a Sunday night, Monday night recording every week from round 1 to round 23, regardless of how good or well we go. We'll obviously keep you guys updated on the socials if we decide to put an update on YouTube with how our round's going, with how the match is going. Just to insider, me and Nathan tried to record one last week, and the recording completely stuffed it. So, yeah, we'll try other ways. We might try YouTube Live to get you guys more involved, which might be the way to go. So we'll see how we go. But until then, we'll catch you either sometime during round 2 or next week for the round 2 recap.